All right, everyone, let's get the show started. Welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's August 18th, 2021. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator. And that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Our call today is recorded. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to our YouTube channel, as well as follow up with an email so you can share it with your team. So today we have a special edition of office hours. Taylor is a senior developer advocate from HashiCorp and most recently joined us last month to give us a demo of the HashiCorp Waypoint product. If you missed it, make sure you check that out on our YouTube channel for the recording. Anyways, today he joins us again to present another live demo, this time of HashiCorp Boundary, which is another nascent project or product out of HashiCorp that I don't feel enough has been talked about. So I'm really excited to get this demo because I really want to see how it works. As we all know, HashiCorp is the company behind phenomenal open source tools like Terraform and Console and Vault. Well, today he's going to be talking about Boundary, which is this zero trust beyond corp style product that provides a simple and secure way to provide remote access to any system anywhere based on trusted identity. So Boundary is intended to be easier, let's say, to set up and provides least privilege access to applications and machines. It's open source and available today. So we're going to get a live demo and answer any questions that you might have. But before we get started, I just want to lay out the format. The format of our call today is a little bit different than you might have seen on our other office hour sessions. I'm going to drive a casual conversation here with Taylor. Feel free to jump in and ask any clarifying questions along the way. Otherwise, let's try and hold like the larger questions until the very end. So with that said, Taylor, you want to kick this off?
Absolutely. So howdy, everyone. My name is Taylor Dolezal, like Eric said, and I am a developer advocate here at HashiCorp. You'll note that I'm wearing a Waypoint shirt. I have a Waypoint talk that I'm giving a little bit later today. So and the Boundary shirt is still in the mail. So apologies, can be completely on brand, but really another great project if you haven't checked it out just yet. I'll go ahead and get my screen shared.
Let me stop sharing here. There you go.
Awesome. I love being a developer advocate because it is really just like show and tell a lot of the time. Awesome. Cool. So you should see my screen. Right now I have the learnhashicorp.com page pulled up, and really just to kind of give you an idea of where Boundary fits into everything. So if you've worked with HashiCorp tools before, hopefully you have. If you haven't, oh my goodness, you're in for a good time, hopefully. We have a whole bunch of products that focus on different areas of the DevOps stack. So if you're running your own infrastructure, whether you're using our paid products, whether you're using the open source products, I typically focus on the open source projects. So that's really where my focus and enthusiasm comes in. You'll note that we have a lot of things for infrastructure like Packer, Vagrant, and Terraform. Really like this graphic. I apologize for those of you on the podcast that can't see it. Definitely recommend checking out HashiCorp's Learn site, and you kind of get to see our DevOps rainbow, if you will. Networking, Console operates within its own space there. Then we have application concerns like Nomad and Waypoint. And then when it comes to security like Boundary and Vault, all of these things offer a lot. I'd say that Terraform and Vault are by far the most popular products because of the spaces in which they operate. And even today, we won't get away from Terraform. I'm using Terraform to set up this infrastructure and these workloads and configure things as well. So moving over to Boundary and security, what is it? Boundary and Waypoint came out about the same time, actually exactly the same time, and they've actually matched all of their releases. So Waypoint's at 0.5, Boundary's at 0.5, and it's been an interesting evolution because Waypoint is a little bit more open-ended in kind of the space in which it operates and its context and its focus, its application delivery, GitOps workflows, things like that. When it comes to Boundary, Boundary's a lot more focused because it's solving the problem of creating access, giving access to people in an organization across different teams and roles and access and kind of dealing with those concerns. You can do this, the trademark the right way and have a VPN set up. You can configure a Bastion host. But the problem that you run into with those kinds of workloads is that you have to set up individual accounts or set up some kind of automation to manage that. That goes away a bit with Boundary. Boundary has its own control plane, and it's able to authenticate and manage each session at a time, and then give feedback to an operator or a DevOps team or platform team that's managing this to get a sense of who logged in, when, what the context was, and just a lot more higher fidelity kind of information. So with that, I'll get into our demo repo that we'll be taking a look at today. Let me see if I can blow this picture up quite a bit. So wow, that's huge. That's not what we wanted. Let me close that out. So again, apologize for you on the podcast that can't see this. I'll make sure to share out this link on this repository. So I have forked my one colleague, Rosemary Wong's the HashiCorp Stack demo app. So what this does is using Terraform is able to set up Boundary, EKS, an RDS instance. And what we're going to do in this demo today is we're going to actually use Boundary to log into the EC2 instance as well as the RDS database. And then we're going to actually populate some data to just show I'm not just connecting to this, I'm actually able to push some data in. This diagram is the entirety of the project. Now, this does include some HashiCorp Cloud platform assets in it. I'm not going to be covering those today. That's mostly, if you wanted to, you could set up console server and vault server in HCP. But again, we won't be covering that today. We're just going to be standing up this infrastructure within Amazon, which is just going to be the Boundary control plane, which is a controller, a worker, and Boundary does need a database backing it to run, a Postgres database. We're going to be creating public and private subnets. And inside of those private subnets, we're going to be standing up an EKS cluster. And on that, we're going to have console running. It's not important to this, just that it is running on the cluster, has a terminating gateway, and then it has console and vault agents in that as well. So that is kind of what we're looking at getting access to. Since I know this isn't a cooking show, but I do have kind of we're going to be baking a cake, but I'm going to pull it out from underneath the counter just because it does take quite a bit of time to get stood up. So I'll kind of walk through some of the Terraform code and then show you Boundary in action and kind of how we get up and running with that, how we actually use it. So I'm using Terraform Cloud to get all this spun up. When you're working at a company, the best thing to do is to use their cloud offerings. And so here we are. I'm not using anything outside of the free tier. So if you do want to fork Rosemary's repository, please do so. Please give her a star if you really enjoy the project, and pay us in stars. That'd be fantastic. So you can see all of these assets that we have here. Again, you can sign up for Terraform Cloud. There's a lot of step-by-step instructions in the repository if you want to follow along or try this at home. And again, everything that you work with here is going to be in the free tier for Terraform Cloud. You might incur some costs when it comes to AWS, depending on what free tier that you're on and what basically kind of depends on that front. So the first thing that we stand up is infrastructure. And again, that's our EKS nodes, our VPC cluster, things like that. There are some variables that we do want to set here when it comes to actually getting this infrastructure stood up. Boundary requires or we're actually going to share out we're going to be creating a key pair and creating a private SSH key rather than having Terraform generate that. We're going to generate that just because we're going to need to integrate that with Boundary when we go to set that up. I'm going to be defining a database password, which might show you here in a little bit, and then a client CIDR block, which is just going to be my IP address so that I can actually allow my own access to this cluster. And I can show you the Boundary UI here in just a little bit. Further down, my environment variables, I added some HCP items. Again, that's not really relevant to this demo today. And then my AWS credentials here, which are masked, which is good. It's great to not share that with the world and have to worry about any Bitcoin miners or anything like that. So we can see, so this infrastructure did run. We are up and running. We do look good on this front. Moving on to Boundary really quick. This I'll go through the code itself and kind of talk to that shortly, but all that we're setting in here, just setting the AWS credentials as well so that we can actually interact and access the Boundary control plane. And then I'm just passing the Terraform Cloud organization and workspace so that I can actually pull the state out of that within Terraform Cloud. I think one of the interesting things and helpful things that using Terraform Cloud is going to be the ability to, let me go into infrastructure here, share I can actually choose which workspaces I share that configuration with. So for those of you following along on the screen today, in this search for workspaces to share with, I access that by going into settings, general settings, and then this boundary configuration. So I can actually, again, allow, sharing of state and accessing state remotely, which is quite nice. All right. So let me jump back. I think that's everything inside of Terraform Cloud. I am going to run something again here in Boundary configuration to show how easy it is to add a user. Now, Boundary, I believe it has the ability to link into other systems, whether it be OpenID Connect or just basically some arbiter of trust, AD, something like that. You can always link Boundary to that and have that, use that to control some of your access. But today we're just going to be adding users atomically just for the sake of the demo. So I'll go ahead and do that. The thing that will make Eric happy is that this is actually in a GitOps type of workflow. It is using Terraform Cloud, though we're setting this up with, this is set up to run with the GitHub repository. So any changes I make and push are going to be planned here. If they pass the plan stage, then they will be applied. All right. So switching into the Terraform code, I'll go ahead and bump this up a bit. Yeah, it's not fun. Zoom is great, but I don't think they have a magnifying glass tool just yet. So really quick, I can go through the infrastructure items here. You can see everything's called out here. If at the end you do want me to go into any of these objects or these resources, modules, what have you, please let me know, and I can have a little bit deeper dive into any of these items that you'd like. The important thing to call out here is going to be the Terraform variables that I have set up. You'll notice all of these items are basically flipping the bit for public endpoints. I've put this in a Ohio region, originally from Cleveland, Ohio, so had a bit of an affinity there for that availability zone. So we're placing our assets into that availability zone or that region, I'm sorry. And then moving over to boundary configuration. That's really going to be the one that is that we're going to be working with today. So we can see we have 3 different teams that we're operating with here: operations, products, and leadership. These are going to map to usernames, and then we're actually generating passwords for each of those. I believe that's in, is it roles or scopes? I can never remember. It all blurs together for me. I think it's in, might be in principles. Yes. So here we can see that we're going to be generating random passwords for each of these different groups of users. And then so we can actually use the Terraform output raw command and actually get that out of Terraform Cloud in that state. So I'm going to go ahead here and also bump up.
And this does work with an SSO provider if one wanted to, just for the purpose of this demo, it's using username, password, credentials. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, I have yet to run through that workflow myself, and so I haven't found the sharp edges or dark corners of those kinds of workflows just yet. But I'm excited to kind of test that out. Working with Waypoint, they just got OpenID Connect support in their latest release, and so I've worked a little bit with that in like the Google context. What's interesting is that GitHub would make a lot of sense for some of these authentications, but there are some things missing with that. I know GitLab offers like full scope abilities and just kind of better OpenID Connect functionality. Whereas GitHub right now, I think that they're missing just a few key features to be able to limit scopes and kind of like have a tighter control on that. So hoping that that's going to get better over time. I assume it will, but that's something I'm still kind of holding out for today. Then that paired with Boundary would be quite phenomenal. All right, so let me think here. What's the first thing I want to show you? So let me go ahead and load up the, let me go into the infrastructure repository or folder, and then let me actually output my Boundary endpoint. So you can see I'm just using Terraform output raw. I'm going to pull out this Boundary endpoint, and then I'm going to go ahead and click onto this. So for those of you that read Holes by Lewis Sacker, this was Zero was the name that Rosemary was using for her base repository. I picked Zeroni, Madam Zeroni. So that's an Easter egg for those of you that follow along with that, just trying to make things more fun. This is Boundaries UI, not anything interesting just yet because we're just seeing the login screen. I'm going to go ahead and put in my name, and like any good login experience, I've forgotten my password. So let's go ahead and grab that too. We're going to find that not in the infrastructure folder, but we're actually going to see that in the Boundary configuration folder. So we'll do that again. We'll get the operations password, and it's going to be this little value here. Go ahead and copy that. And then we'll log in here. So the way that Boundary works is that you declare an organization. Inside of that organization, you have users, groups, roles, auth methods, and that's where you'd integrate with an SSO type of item. We have two different projects in here. And what those are core infra, which is going to be the context of users logging into the EC2 instances, and then products, which is going to allow access to the RDS instance itself. Now, you can tweak the scopes and kind of, again, atomically adjust control with what you want users to have. I'm not going to get too deep into that just because it's a little bit longer form subject. Definitely recommend checking out this repository from Rosemary as to kind of how she set up that access and the Boundary documentation as well. But at some point in time in the future, once I get a little bit better handle of it, we'll definitely share more information on that front. But a lot of ability to kind of tweak the control that you want to give in how you give access out to your users. So right here, I'm going to go into this core infra, and then now you'll see the context has changed. I'm going to go to sessions here. So we can see when I was testing this before, just earlier today, the status is terminated, and that's good. It's good to know that no one's logged into our critical infrastructure that we're running here. So let's go ahead and actually log into this right now. So I'm going to go back up to the top of the directory, and we have a few commands that we can run here, but we've made it a little bit easier to run with a makefile. So let me go ahead and hide this here. So we can see, first, we're going to authenticate to Boundary. We're going to run this SSH operations command, which is going to authenticate us for the operations user. And then after that, we're going to connect via SSH to that EC2 instance. So you can see a lot to type here, and kind of like Eric had said before, security is always difficult because it's something to set up or specify access to, but thank goodness for makefiles. This makes us a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and run make SSH operations. And then we'll see the output of running those Boundary commands. Now, behind the scenes, I've already exported the environment variables for this too. All of these operations are called out inside of the repository as well. So don't fret. And if you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to walk through this with you. If I don't know something, happy to figure out with you too. So I've run this command, and we can see that we're actually inside of the Amazon Linux machine. Who am I? We're going to see EC2 user. If we wanted to, the nice thing about Boundary too is that we have this ability to control the session right from either the CLI or the UI in this case. So I'm logged in and, let's say, I'm about to do something that isn't well advised, or say that you're seeing a session that isn't expected. You can actually thwart that in real time if you're paying attention. Hit cancel, and then we'll see that gets closed out automatically, which is really nice. So again, if you see something that looks kind of fishy, then you have that full access and ability to control that here. I'm personally really interested in use cases of how we might be able to respond to these things programmatically, or get alerts on things that shouldn't be logged into. Maybe some policy control about when, authenticating, like, okay, it's fine to log into this machine during this patch window or this time, otherwise don't allow this access. Really, really interesting use cases and workflows that I'm curious to discover here in the future. So, and just like that, since we have those credentials, we can log in again. And then I can show just exiting and then naturally, so that, I'm not kicking myself out of the system, or our boundary operator is not kicking us out of the system. We can see we've logged in here again. I'll go ahead and type out exit, and then we'll see that resolve here in the UI, and we can see that session there. So that is, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just ask a clarifying question real quick? When you were saying if the administrator sees something suspicious, like it isn't like session logging or anything like that. You can't actually watch like the user session, right? It's just like a suspicious logon that you're saying that they could look for, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't like keystroke logging or anything like that, like in the session itself.
Like Teleport lets you actually see the live stream of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. That's correct. Yeah. Boundary is nice in that it allows you access to SSH, TCP, or RDP type of sessions. And so it facilitates those sessions and creates the link between them. But like you said, it doesn't give you that full visibility into shoulder surfing, if you will, and kind of like seeing what's going on and that full teleport capability. Again, I don't know the future plans for that either, but if that is a question too, that's something I could definitely take a look at and ask the team on that front. Cool.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Anytime. All right. So that is EC2 instances. Next up, we have, if you have any questions, please feel free to, hold them to the end, at me on Twitter or anything like that too, or get them queued up. More than happy to answer that. So next, let's jump into products and say that we're facilitating products users and access to databases. Now that is a whole nother realm of sharing passwords or accessing things. I've worked at places that have gotten Vault set up, and despite all the efforts and to do the right thing, there's still people that will share these credentials out in Slack, or have a passwords sticky note underneath their monitor. Despite all of the efforts to do things the right way, things can still fall short when you don't make the implementation of that easy. So let's go ahead and get this database example set up. I'll go in here into sessions so that we can see that. You'll see one from earlier as well. And we'll actually go into, I forget which command this is. Let me go ahead and take a look at that actually. I think it is there it is. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually, the way that this tutorial is set up is such that you go in and you execute SQL to populate this database. But I'm actually going to show that to you beforehand and show you the empty database just to show you I've got nothing up my sleeves. I'm not doing any magic tricks just yet. Maybe one day, but not today. So we're going to go ahead and run this make Postgres products. And that's going to be pretty similar to what you saw before. Just so it's going to authenticate with this app dev login name and role. And then it's going to connect to Postgres now and not via an SSH connection. And I have forgotten to put in my very secret database password, change me, permutation of change me. So let's go ahead and put that in. We'll run Postgres products one more time, and then that should work. And we're in. Awesome. So this database already has products as its database name from when we set it up with Terraform. But if we go forward or \L, we can see, our list of databases. We can see that we have everything here populated. This is all good. So let's say that we want to, is that I got to turn on caps lock because I'm doing some SQL here, right? I think it's coffees, or it's coffee or coffees. We're going to see this doesn't exist just yet. I'll do coffee just in case I'm wrong on that one. Okay, so we can see that we don't have anything that exists. This demo application that we're using for this example is HashiCorp, which is a coffee company, and kind of to illustrate how we might do a Terraform provider, work with that code. And so being that it's this full-fledged example application, obviously has a database, and we need to load coffees in there so that we can actually integrate with that, work with the API is kind of the backstory to this. So we can see we don't have that yet. So I'm going to go ahead and quit out of this Postgres database. And we'll also see that session was logged for that too. So we saw this one got terminated, the one that I didn't have the right database password just because it couldn't connect, but it will still log that, and it will still show that our app dev user worked with that. And then this is canceling out this session right now. So that is as we expect. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to grab this make configure DB command. Let's paste that into our terminal, and then go ahead and run that. That's actually going to execute that SQL command. I'll go ahead and show you that full make file here. Well, we can see that we're loading in this products item here. What's this? That's fine. I'll pull that up later. So we can see that we've loaded that. Let's go ahead and go back into that database and take a look at all the coffees and things like that we've added. So this will take another second. I'll open the Boundary UI on the side so you can see what I'm doing and that this is active. All right. Whoops. Again, put on caps lock so that I can do proper SQL, right? Let's deselect all from coffee or coffees. And we can see all of those values here. So again, making that database access really easy to give to your team members and not have to worry about these different contexts or these getting the correct network access given out to the right people, things like that. The way that Boundary works is that Boundary has to operate within a public subnet space so that people can access it. Again, that BeyondCorp type setup. And then it has workers and the ability and other things placed into an area where it can connect to that private subnet. So if you do have a public subnet, that then you can kind of operate and get context back and forth. You have that throughput between the machines. As long as that exists, you're good to go. You don't have to set up any of your own Bastion hosts on your own. You don't have to set up VPNs and manage that configuration on your own. You can allow Boundary to take care of that. So we've shown how we can get this access given out and delivered to people with not too much effort whatsoever. If we wanted to, I'll go ahead and quit this quit database here. If we wanted to, say, give a new user access to our system, let's go ahead and take a look at how we could do that. So let's go back into Boundary configuration. And let's say that someone is joining the leadership team. So I can just go ahead and add to this list. Looks like Copilot likes the name Matt. Yeah, why not? Let's go ahead and add Matt to the leadership team. Congratulations, Matt. Really, really happy about that promotion. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and use the GitOps workflow. I've already gotten that pre-configured with Terraform Cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and do a git add. We'll add that here. Let's add Matt to the leadership team. And then let's go ahead and push that. So I'm going to go ahead and queue up Terraform Cloud so that we can actually see that run as well. That might take just a second to pick up that change. But this workflow is going to make it easy to kind of make those changes. Again, in an ideal situation and state, you're going to have, and I push that too. You're going to have this set up with a third-party system or like a broker type system. Go ahead and refresh that. And did I set this up correctly? I might not have. Version control. Okay, that should be fine. There it goes. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, configuration, live demos. I swear I'll get it right one day. Let's take a look at our run. We can see that this was triggered via GitHub, and we're going to go ahead and see this. Once this plan looks good to go, it's going to actually apply this to boundary, which happens pretty quickly. The best way to set this up as well is to use Terraform in a different workspace to set up your infrastructure and then handle configuration elsewhere. Terraform's nice because you have this ability to stand everything up from end to end and configure it all in one go, but that's not the best in terms of being able to operate on it and iterate on things in the future. That there are more patterns developing out like that for Kubernetes, for example, and EKS. You run into issues because you might stand up your EKS cluster and then say you want to upgrade that. Well, if you go to upgrade it, if you're doing that in place, sometimes Terraform can get confused on, am I setting this value for my old cluster, my new cluster, spin up the new cluster, and then try to reference the old configuration, and it's not in the right place. You kind of get into these weird scenarios rather than using a data source to basically stub that out and then almost use dependency injection, if you will, to kind of configure those between the two. So all that to say, really great to stand up your infrastructure first, handle configuration second, rather than doing it all in one go. Has been a pattern that's really been helping a lot of people do more things with their Terraform and with their configuration. So we can see that we've added Matt to the leadership team. That has worked out successfully. And then I have to double check. I think the password for managers is foo. So let's go ahead and log out of myself, and let's log in as Matt to see if we can actually get into the system. And yes, that is correct. Managers should have the ability to look at things, but not to actually run them or look at sessions and things like that, because we don't want everybody taking a look at what's going on. So that is looking correct. That's all good. Matt can see everything that's going on, but can't actually go in or check those sessions. So there we go. That is showing how we can add users. We could do the same thing and remove Matt too, and then we just wouldn't be able to log in with his credentials. So that is Boundary. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer that, as well as share out this repository, because there is a lot going on with this and a lot to introspect. And yeah, more than happy to answer anything else I can on that front.
That was a great demo, Taylor. Thank you for covering all of that. Yeah, let's transition here over to Q&A. Any questions?
I have a silly question. I just want to know what product manager actually came up with and thought it was a good idea to call that option deauthenticate instead of log out.
That's a good question. I'll have to ask and let you know.
That's funny.
Like every product in the world says log out except for this.
Yeah, or sign out. Log out or sign out. Deauthenticate.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, I just saw that when you did that. I was like, huh, that's an interesting choice of a verb.
It did throw me for a second when I was working with it a couple of days back. I was just like, log. Oh, okay. Never mind. And then it all clicked for me. But yeah, same.
So has Boundary undergone any like external pen tests? Where is it on the security spectrum of being hardened, tested?
That That I don't know, actually. That's something I have to check on. I know that with our various products, they're in many states. So like, getting Terraform cloud FedRAMP approval, for example. I know that there are certain efforts being made on those fronts. And, just when it comes to each of the different contexts and operating within them, our products are at various states. I don't know what Boundary is at right now, but definitely could take a look at that and get back to you on that.
So I guess a follow up on that would be, hey, is it ready for Pride? What's HashiCorp saying?
I think so. I think that right now it's still definitely early days. It's been just a little. I think it's been a little bit shy of a year as far as being out. I know the team's really focused on hardening it, on making sure that we're checking all the boxes where we can with security. A lot of the dependencies for Boundary actually came from Vault, and it's using a lot of Vault's underlying technologies and libraries and methods to keep things secure too. So. Yeah. Which is nice, and in allowing that kind of shareability and modularity in terms of those two projects.
Now, that's I'll follow up on what you just said there, integration with Vault or leveraging some of the prior art that you had in Vault. But what about like using some of the nice ephemeral users or credentials, whatever they call that in Vault? Is that something it supports today for RDS, for example?
Yes. So I think that's essentially what's happening when you're running those commands and running, attaching via an SSH method or logging into that Postgres database. It's essentially creating that session, those tokens, those credentials in real time, and then getting rid of them. And so that's the value add too, is that you don't have this lingering, like, oh, I thought we let that person, that person left like a month ago. Yeah. You don't have that problem anymore, which is nice.
So I forgot you had a detailed diagram kind of the architecture, but I don't remember it photographically. Was Vault in there?
So no, Vault is. Okay. No worries. Vault is in there. You can connect to it. The way in which it's used in this demo application is kind of connecting to HashiCorps and supporting those types of integrations. But Boundary does operate on its own. Its only dependency is that Postgres database to be able to store all of those users and things like that. I think I do have to get more information from the team and kind of what the direction or thoughts are on that front, because ideally you don't want any kind of dependencies, right? Like something like integrated storage might be nice, but I don't know where the team is on that front in terms of integrating those types of solutions into the product itself.
Yeah, I've done some reading on this, and my understanding, and maybe it was wrong, is that the dynamic and just the dynamic secrets and the just-in-time credentials, I thought they required Vault, because I thought Vault was the thing that actually did that on Boundary's behalf. Is that not true?
So I believe that you can integrate Boundary with Vault to get access to those kinds of contexts. But Boundary's really facilitating the tunneling between you and the machine that you want to get access to, and then tracking that session. But in terms of getting access to it, so I didn't set up Vault for this demo, and so it should be able to access on its own. But obviously, depending on your configuration or the kinds of integrations that you want to set up, that might vary. The mileage might vary on that one.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So what kind of logging is available today from the product? Now, we saw that graphical thing, but can we have like webhook events go fire off somewhere, or can we have a stream, ship off to Splunk or something?
I think that's one thing I'm interested in. I haven't taken a look at that just yet, but that's that's the use case that I see. You can get a little bit more information with the CLI or with the API to kind of like get the more metadata around time and some things like that. But But that would, to me, that's kind of what I would want to see too, is that like,
Right.
if this happens, then at least, maybe log somewhere else with Splunk, or let me know, like this is a PagerDuty event if somebody logs into a red zone with pre-release content and, trying to share out the latest Marvel movie or something like that. I definitely,
Yeah.
I want to know, even though I don't work at Disney anymore, but
So is there a public roadmap for Boundary of what they're working on next or anything like that?
I don't know. I'm actually going to take a look at that. I know that most teams, the best way for a lot of projects at HashiCorp, usually they'll annotate their milestones. And so you won't see that immediately. So like for Waypoint, obviously I work a little bit closer with the Waypoint team. That's why I have more context there than on Boundary. But typically the teams at HashiCorp will populate a milestone. Boundary 05 just came out, so you might not see anything in 06 just yet. I'm actually going to go and check that out. See if they have anything in there right now. But I know Waypoint has a public roadmap. I'm not sure about Boundary.
So while you're checking on that, I'll just add some color to the last question from Eric. There's a concept of events that are emitted when certain things happen, including audit level events, which they claim is sort of still a work in progress, but audit events have a file sync capability, so you can basically export them in JSON file, like in real time. They would be emitted either to standard error or to a file or both, and then obviously you'd be able to hook that with Splunk and then send, ingest that to do what you want to do. So, but it still says like kind of like early days, still working on it, like work in progress. So not everything is quite there yet, but they have the concept and they're building on it.
Yeah, cool. Good to know. Yeah, hard to go wrong with JSON. That's I did just check Boundary with milestones. They do have 051 and 052 open, but no 06 stuff just yet.
Okay. I guess a follow up on that, the reason why I asked was like the session logging or replays for certain wire protocols would be interesting. Now, if it's just a dumb proxy, I don't mean that in a condescending way. If it's just like a primitive proxy moving bytes around, obviously you can't do that with SSH. But this is one of those really nice things with gravitational teleport. Like you can have like YouTube style playback of somebody's SSH session to see what happened.
Honestly, that would be really incredible to see. I did find Boundary's roadmap. That was on the website, but not in the GitHub repository. So I shared that link in Slack. But that's definitely helpful. And to follow up with one thing that Matt had said, thinking back to our example, we generated and uploaded a key pair. So we already had access to that machine. We had a known way to log into that machine. Same thing with the database itself. So while those sessions were being created in real time, we're cheating, right? We already had the credentials to log into those machines. One of the things that lists on this roadmap is that just-in-time access that does require that integration with Vault, just like you said. So to offer more information there from what I just saw, but yeah, in terms of getting that replay access and getting like that higher fidelity of what kinds of things are run, because those are going to be the questions that are asked, right? Is like if someone compromised your system or even made a mistake, say they were okay to be there, or patching the system or running a database migration and it didn't go as planned, having the ability to introspect that and correct that, get a feedback loop open on that would be quite helpful.
All right, I agree. Anybody else have some questions? Any questions? So have you heard any internal chatter? Obviously you can't break NDA or anything, but any cloud offering coming soon for this?
So both with Waypoint and with Boundary, I think the teams are always focused on ways in which it can scale, that's never out of the question. I don't think, but haven't heard too much on that front. But I know that when it comes to both Waypoint and Boundary, both the thought and plan for those products was to have them in an open source context for a while, to kind of, because it makes sense. It's one thing if you try to monetize a product immediately, it's just
right.
For a lot of us that kind of loses its appeal, right? Where's the focus? Is it on helping people out? Is it on teaching people something? Is it on making a workflow easier? Or is it just like, hey, can I see your credit card again? It's it's the intent. And so that's something I've liked about both those products. I'm absolutely biased, but one thing I've liked about both those products is kind of that, like, let's figure out how this works first, and then we can kind of figure that stuff out down the road. It seems to be the overall focus, similarly to Terraform, similarly to Vault and Consul and other products as well.
All right. Any feedback on the demo? Any feedback on what you experienced today? Improvements you'd like to see from anyone?
Hey, right off rip, I'm seeing in that demo, and I'm not gonna like the Postgres. So is there any, I would say, approach to switching that out with a NoSQL solution?
When it comes to, so I think that with boundaries dependency, I don't believe that's changeable right now. That's something I have to look at a little bit more with more depth in, but that's something that's pretty well contained. You shouldn't really need to mess with that much. When it comes to, if you wanted to say, whether it be Mongo or something else, if you're hosting that kind of workload, you should be able to use Boundary and its TCP capability. That's kind of the escape hatch, right? Is we have SSH, we have those database the connection to the database ability, RDP, but TCP is really the thing that unifies all of that. So you do have that ability, even if it's something that you want to give access to, that's say like an endpoint in a secret or in a private network space. You would have the ability to kind of link that together and then give that session out to someone that's trying to log in.
Excellent, thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think personally, some feedback as far as other things to explore that I'd like to see is really just kind of breaking down more. There's a lot here, security is tough. There's always a lot of that learning curve is just like, straight up. It's like some of the hills out here in Los Angeles. It's just like, how is this real? But breaking that down for something that's a little bit more easily digestible to kind of share out and just kind of like chunk that up is something that I'd kind of like to explore and see if we can make a little bit easier, as well as integrating with some SSO solutions, whether it be, Google, something like that would kind of be nice to see and fun to like, give people access to, or like make a game that we could get access to in a private network space, and then just add people on GitHub in real time and share that out, like make it, doesn't have to be this business case scenario. We can make it a little bit fun because it's a demo.
What my feedback was like, well, HashiCorp products, why I get excited about a lot of them is that they're very easy on the command line and have a very modern kind of UX, not driven by 1,000 flags that you got to remember. And this felt like a departure from that a little bit. Like seeing those commands you had to run, that was like executing a Java app or something. And I'd like to see that more intuitive.
Absolutely. And I can give that feedback to the team as well. I think that I agree with that completely. In my experience, it's understanding like the target IDs and this and that. One thing that I was happy about was kind of seeing that on the Boundary roadmap, there's that target discovery feature that they're looking at too, because that is something that's a little bit more. That's more involved. At the end of the day,
I'd like to just see Boundary login, enter my credentials, bam. Next command just inherits that session. So it's just like Boundary LS, and I see the cert, and then Boundary connect, PGO1 for the Postgres database, whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's that's my hope too. As we get closer to 0.1 with this project, obviously don't have a crystal ball or a time machine, so don't know when it'll hit 1.0 or anything on that front. But I absolutely agreed. I think that's going to be the way to succeed, rather than all the flags that you can remember. It reminds me of the XKCD comic, the someone that has to defuse the bomb without Googling how to untar a file. I'll never remember those flags.
That's hilarious. I'd like to, or it's one of these things. I understand they're built in kind of silos, these products, but it seems like, okay, so Boundaries get more a tighter integration with Vault, but now Boundaries seems like there's some overlap even with Waypoint, and how Waypoint, you remotely access those environments, and then there's this Waypoint server that gives you a temporary URL. It feels like that kind of falls in the lap of Boundary. At the same time, you don't want to have, like you said, dependency hell, where you got to install Vault, you got to install Boundary, you got to install Waypoint, you got to install all these other things to get it up and running. So at the same time, I want integration, but I don't know where that line is.
It's so difficult, and it's a great point. It's using the right tool for the right job, but at the same point, what does the workflow look like? That's one of the things that I like with that's as a developer advocate, that's really what we try to focus on, and try to make products that make things easier. One thing that I've been working on a colleague with for a while is a Nomad starter module. That already exists today, but there's no easy way to be like, we've chunked that out, like use Packer to create for my cloud of choice. Okay, we have our image, then another repository for setting up the infrastructure, then another one for configuration. But
or even maybe as something, a workflow, what do you call it, in Waypoint that does that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's I think that those conversations are happening, and I'm really excited. I'm hearing more of them happen too. And like with Waypoint, they're still kind of they're thinking on and kind of discussing different ways to interact with Terraform, because it is a Venn diagram kind of overlap right there. Because like, what manages infrastructure? Is it Waypoint? Is it Terraform? How do we denote that? And then, even to install these products or link them together, what's the most straightforward way to do that? And simplicity is always difficult, kind of approach on those problems.
I feel like, though, for Waypoint, that's so important, because otherwise, like, you got to be building for actual use cases, not contrived examples. So if you're actually doing it to achieve something that your customers want to achieve, I guess you're doing that to some degree, just different problems, different use cases.
Exactly. And that's where the feedback comes in. I think a lot of people working with a lot of teams or product teams, things like that at other companies, there's always kind of this like, what, you got a problem with this? It's like, no. That's not the vibe at HashiCorp at all. It's just like, oh my gosh, tell me about it. Let's figure this out, because at the end of the day, we don't want that kind of experience for anybody. That was the whole, foundation of the company was Mitchell starting it off, at that time unknowingly with the Vagrant, and kind of like, this is VBox is just so difficult to use, like, let me write an abstraction, make that easier. That's kind of the core foundation. So that feedback's really important, and please keep it coming. If something doesn't feel right to you, doesn't sit well with you, doesn't work with your workflow, I really do want to know about it.
All right, any closing questions here? Any more questions from the audience? Don't be shy.
What's the next demo?
Yeah, seriously, Taylor, this has been great.
Good question.
I know we've
Nomad. I think it's Nomad. Yeah.
I think I owe Nomad some time in the sun, the proverbial sun. But I think that's probably going to be the next demo. I do have I have quite a few events coming up, and so I think that oh my gosh, my calendar is wild. But September, I know there's some things going on, just personal stuff, vacations, things like that. October is going to be wild because we have HashiConf. We've got KubeCon. November is going to be crazy, prepping for reInvent and just all these other things. But I'm sure we could find some time in there. But
okay,
it'll be fun.
Well, that's good to know. Well, thank you again, Taylor, so much for a sweet demo. went off without a hitch. So I look forward to having you back on in a few months, maybe, or when things calm down again. This has been sweet. So everyone, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to be posting a recording of this to our YouTube channel. Head over to youtube.com/c/cloudposse to get that recording and share it with your team. If you haven't yet already subscribed to our office hours, you can do that easily by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session. So please stay in touch and see you all next week, same time, same place.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.